Today we're going to be working on applications of systems of equations, day number 4. Content objective: students will be able to solve word problems that lead to multi-step equations or a system of two equations. Language objective is students will be able to translate a word problem to a multi-step equation or a system of two equations. And last but not least, why am I learning this? Well, it's important for real-world problems, and you will see more over this lesson as well as the last few lessons that we've been working on. So all of this is going to be review. It's just a matter of, are you going to know how to set it up depending on how the question is being phrased. So in this case, it does say 2 notebooks and 9 pens cost $22. 5 notebooks and 6 pens cost $22. Find the cost of a notebook and a pen. So the two unknowns is what's the cost of a notebook and what's the cost of a pen. So for those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and pick N for the cost of notebooks and then P for the cost of pens. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and start creating my equations. So it says here 2 notebooks and 9 pens cost $22. So that I'm going to go ahead and write 2 notebooks, which is 2N, plus 9 pens, which would be plus 9p, cost $22, so that's going to equal 22. And for the next equation, 5 notebooks and 6 pens cost $22 as well. So 5 notebooks plus 6 pens is going to cost $22. Looking at this equation now, I'm thinking elimination is probably going to be my best bet. I have the choice of eliminating the n's or the p's. I think eliminating the n's is going to be a little bit easier. Between the 2 and the 5, the lowest common multiple is 10. So I'm going to have to multiply this first equation by 5 and the second equation by a 2. Since here both of them are positive, I have to make one of them negative. I tend to choose the smaller number to be negative. So here my equation is going to change to 10n plus 45p equals 5 times 22. Let's do that off to the side. That's 10, carry the 1 is 110. For the next equation, we're going to end up with negative 10n minus 12p equals negative 44. So at this point, the n's cancel each other out, leaving me with, let's see, 5 minus 2 is 3, 4 minus 1 is 3. We have 33p equals, here we're going to have to borrow. 10 minus 4 is 6, I have to borrow again. 10 minus 4 is 6. So here, simply divide off your coefficient. And I'm going to end up with P equals 2. So now, just a friendly reminder, P is the cost of a pen. So right now, I know that pens cost $2. However, I still need to figure out the cost of a notebook. So what do? Well, I simply plug it into one of the two equations, whichever one you prefer. In this case, it really doesn't matter which one. I'm going to choose the first one, which was 2n plus 9p. Instead of a p, I'm going to go ahead and plug in my 2 equals 22. So here we have 2n plus 18 equals 22. Get rid of your constant from both sides, leaving me with 2n equals 4. Now simply divide both sides by 2, and I'm left with n equals 2. So now I can see that a notebook also costs $2. So at this point, I can go ahead and answer that notebooks cost $2 and pens also cost $2. Okay, so now let's try the next one. Joe bought 13 items for $60. If the 13 items consisted of notebooks that cost $5 each and calculators that cost $4 each, how many of each did he buy? So right now I'm looking at how many of notebooks did he buy and how many calculators did he buy. So that's definitely going to be my variable. I'm going to go ahead and say N is going to be the number of notebooks he purchased, and then C represent the number of calculators he purchased. So this problem is different than the other one because I'm noticing here 13 items was a total and so was $60. So now it's just thinking of how did we come up with these totals? So how did I come up with a total of 13 items? Well, it's because we took the number of notebooks, which was N, and we combined that to the number of calculators, which was C. Okay, this was probably one of the first lessons that we did with word problem. So it's been a while, but you can see that it should look familiar. Now, the other part is, how was $60 spent? Well, it's because every notebook cost, let's see, $5. So I'm going to go ahead and write 5 times n, because that's what would contribute the cost of the notebooks. Make that a little bit more neater. And then what about the calculators? Well, the calculators cost $4 each. So just the cost of the calculators alone would be 4 times the number of calculators. So now that we have our 2 equations, you have choices. You can definitely use substitution, or you can use elimination. I personally like using elimination. However, I do understand that some of my students do prefer to use substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and show substitution as well. Keep in mind, try to consider, hey, do you want to distribute a 5 or do you want to distribute a 4? I think I'd rather distribute a 4 because it really doesn't matter which variable you solve for. They're about equally the same. So in this case, to distribute a 4, let's go ahead and solve for c. I'm going to subtract n from both sides, which would leave me with c equals negative n plus 13. Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and write down the other equation, which was 5n plus 4c equals 60. I'm going to go ahead and take this expression here and substitute it in for c, which leaves me with 5n plus 4 times the quantity, negative n plus 13 equals 60. So now I'm going to have 5n distribute, so minus 4n, distribute again. This was a 13. Let's do 13 times 4. It's going to be 52. So it's positive equals 60. I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. This is going to leave me with n plus 52 equals 60. Simply subtract 52 from both sides, and I end up with n equals 8. What does n stand for? Well, n stands for the number of notebooks. So right now I know there's 8 notebooks. But what about calculators? Well, again, you're just going to plug it into one of the originals. So you're either plug it into the first equation or the second equation. The first one definitely seems easier. So I'm going to go ahead and put n instead of n. I'm going to put my 8 plus c equals 13. So simply subtract 8 from both sides. You end up with c equals, let's see, 5. Now, one thing I do want to mention is they did tell you that there was a total of 13 items. So if you know 8 of them are notebooks, you can kind of deduct that 5 of them will then be calculators. But if not, always feel free to plug it into one of the 2 equations and you should still get the same answer. So 8 of them are notebooks and 5 of them are calculators. So I can go ahead and answer the question now. 8 are notebooks and 5 are calculators. Okay, so hopefully this looks familiar. Let's go ahead and try number 3. Number 3 says container A has 42.5 liters of water and is being filled at a rate of 10.5 liters per minute. Container B has 227.5 liters of water and is being drained 26.5 liters per minute. How many minutes will it take for the 2 containers to have the same amount of water? So 2 things are being considered. How long in minutes and how much water in liters. So for those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and say M is going to represent the number of minutes. And then since the amount of water is measured in liters, I'm going to go ahead and say L is the number of liters. Okay, so let's see, what do we have here? Well, we have one container A, so let's write that down, container A. And we have another container B. Okay. Well, in container A, there is 42.5 liters of water. So I'm going to write that down, 42.5 liters of water, and it's being filled. So if it's being filled, definitely we're going to be adding at a rate of 10.5 liters per minute. So if it's per minute, I'm going to go ahead and put 10.5 M. Okay, so what does that equal? Well, that basically is going to give me the total amount of water in liters. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is equal to L. What about container B? Container B has 227.5 of water and is being drained. Because it's being drained, I'm going to say that we're subtracting because it's losing water. It's losing 26.5 liters per minute. So we're going to put minus 26.5 m. And again, this is basically going to tell me the number of liters altogether. So now that I have my two equations, I can go ahead and solve. Looking at the two, I'm definitely going to be using substitution. So I'm going to go ahead and take this value here and substitute it in for L. Again, you can always think of it as you're basically setting them equal to each other. So 42.5 plus 10.5 m equals 227.5 minus 26.5 m. I do have variables on both sides, and in a case like that, I do like to move it over to the left when possible. So let's add 26.5 m to this side, leaving me with 42.5 plus, let's see, that's going to be 0, carry the 1, it's going to be 37 m equals 227.5. Since I went ahead and moved the variable over to the left, I'm going to move my constant over to the right by subtracting 42.5 from both sides, leaving me with 37 m equals, I'm definitely going to do some side work, 227.5 minus 42.5. It's going to be 0, 5. Let's borrow. That's going to be, let's see, 8 and 1, bring down the decimal. So it's going to be 185. Now all we have to do is divide both sides by 37, leaving me with m equals, and again, you're going to have to do some side work here. Just going to erase this so I have a little bit more space. 185 divided by 37. This is about, let's see, I think it's going to go about 5 times. Let me test it out. It's going to be 5, carry the 3, 13, 14, 15, 15, 16, 17, 18. It goes nicely 5 times. So I'm going to go ahead, it's going to be 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and answer the question. I would go ahead and say the amount of water will be the same at 5 minutes. Okay, perfect. So let's just continue to move on to the next problem. So here, we haven't done these problems in a while, but hopefully it looks familiar. It says here, the width of a rectangle is 3 times the length. If the perimeter is 112, find the width and find the length. So just as a friendly reminder, I'm just going to quickly draw a rectangle so that you can see how many lengths there are and how many widths there are. Okay, so seeing this rectangle, I can see that there should be 2 lengths and 2 widths. Okay, let's try that again. So here, it does say the width of the rectangle is 3 times the length. So from this, you should be deciding right now which one is your shorter value. In this case, you're hopefully thinking it's definitely length. So for that reason, I'm just going to go ahead and assign L for the length. I do want to mention that L is going to represent the length. And here, I'm not going to have to use a separate variable for W, which aka is width, mainly because the width is being compared to the length. It says the width of a rectangle is 3 times the length. So instead of just putting W here, I understand the width is 3 times the length. So I'm just going to write 3L for both. So here, the length is L, the length is L, the width is 3L, and again, the width is 3L. So now I do know that the perimeter is 112. So basically, how do I find perimeter? Well, I'll take the sum of all sides. So I'm going to say length plus the width, which was 3L, plus the other width, which is also 3L. Now, the first time I taught this, a lot of my students had the tendency of writing 4L plus 6. But please understand there's one L here, and there's another L here. So here we have 2 L's plus another 3L. It's going to give me 5 plus another 3L. It's going to give me 8L. So we're going to put 8L equals 112. Simply divide both sides by 8, and the length should equal, let's see, 112 divided by 8 goes in once. That's going to go in nicely 4 times. So the length is 14. Now remember, we're not done. We know that the length is 14, but what about the width? Well, the width is 3L. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 times L, which is 14, which is going to leave you with, let's see, 14 times 3, which is going to leave me with 42. Okay, so therefore I'm going to say the length is 14 and the width is 42. So again, hopefully this looks familiar. Now moving on. Noemi raised $44 by selling 12 baked items for the math club. She sold cookies for $5 each and brownies for $3 each. How many of each did she sell? So hopefully as you read that, you saw, okay, I definitely saw 2 grand totals. One was the $44 and the other was the 12 baked items. Okay. Now, what were some of the questions that are being asked? It says, how many of each did she sell? Okay, so right now I'm interested in how many cookies did she sell. So let's go ahead and let C represent the number of cookies. And then we're also interested in how many brownies. So let's go ahead and put B is the number of brownies. Okay, so first is we need to figure out, between the two, I like to figure out how did we get the 12 baked items? So let's go ahead and figure out how did we come up with 12 items? Well, it's because we took the number of cookies, which was C, and we added it to the number of brownies, which is B. So that's generally one of the easier equations to come up with. Now the next one is, how did we come up with the total of $44? Well, it's because each cookie cost $5. So let's go ahead and write 5 times C. And each brownie costs $3, so that's going to be 3B. So here you have your system. I'm just going to go ahead and solve. In this case, I am going to go ahead and practice using the elimination, since last time I used substitution. Let's go ahead and multiply this first equation by -3 to eliminate the b's, leaving me with -3c minus 3b equals -36. Now this equation is going to stay exactly the same, so we're going to just write 5c plus 3b equals 44. Here the b's cancel out, leaving me with 2c equals, here I'm going to do some side work, 44 minus 36. Please never hesitate to do side work. You're less likely to make mistakes in trying to do the work here. So notice I didn't subtract here because 44 is a larger digit. It has to go on top. So let's go ahead and borrow. It's going to be 8. So simply divide both sides by 2, leaving me with c equals 4. So what is c? That means the number of cookies. So I can say that there's 4 cookies. Okay, now what about brownies? Again, you're going to use one of the 2 equations. So I'm going to use the first one since it seems more simple. C plus B equals 12. I'm going to go ahead and plug 4 in for C. So 4 plus B equals 12. Subtract 4 from both sides, and I'm left with B equals 8. B is the number of brownies, so that's going to be 8 brownies, and they should add up to 12, which looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that there are 4 cookies and 8 brownies. Okay, moving on. We're almost there. We have 2 more to go. It says here, 3 notebooks and 2 pens cost $8.25. 2 notebooks and 3 pens cost $8. How much would 2 notebooks and 2 pens cost? So right away, they are asking a question that's unlike ones that we've been asked before. They're actually asking how much is 2 notebooks and 2 pens. But this, again, we can handle, just figure out how much 1 notebook costs and double it to figure out how much it would cost for 2, and do the same for pens. So the main thing is we actually want to know how much it's going to cost for 1 notebook. So let's go ahead and use N for the cost of 1 notebook. And we also want to know the cost of 1 pen. So let's go ahead and let P represent that cost of 1 pen. So now at this point, let's just go ahead and translate the information that was given to us. 3 notebooks, so let's put 3N, and 2 pens, so that's plus 2P, cost, so that's going to equal $8.25. So that's the first line of information that was given to us. Now the second one is 2 notebooks, so I'm going to put 2N and 3 pens, so that's going to be plus 3P, cost $8, so I'm just going to put plus 8. Notice the 2 zeros is not it's not necessary at all. Leaving it in there is just going to make it a little bit more work when you're multiplying numbers and things like that. So just leave them off, it's not necessary. Here I'm going to decide that elimination is probably going to be my best bet, so I'm going to go ahead and eliminate. In this case, it really doesn't matter if you eliminated the N's or the P's, they're about the same with difficulty, so I'll multiply this by 2 and this by 3. I'm going to make this one negative since both of them are the same sign. That's going to leave me with a negative 6N minus 4P equals negative 1650. Same here, we're going to have 6N plus 9P equals 16. At this point, the N's cancel each other out, leaving me with, let's see, 5P. I'm so sorry, I made a big boo-boo. It doesn't equal 16. Let's try it again. 3 times 8 is actually 24. Big difference, sorry about that. Okay, thought something looked strange. Now let's go ahead and subtract what we have here. We have 24. Let's put that decimal in so that we can line up the other values. This is going to be 0. We're going to borrow. We're going to have to borrow once more. So we're going to be left with $7.50. Now, real quick, I knew something was wrong in the beginning when I initially had 16. Why? Because my number would be negative here, if that was the case. Therefore, the cost of pens would actually be a negative amount, which shouldn't happen. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. If you have a negative answer, you might want to look back into your work and see if you did anything wrong, because there's a good chance that you did. So now let's go ahead and divide both sides by 5. And I'm going to end up with P equals, let's see, it's going to go in once and then 5 times evenly. So it's going to be $1.50. So that's the cost of 1 pen. Well, what about the cost of a notebook? Again, you're going to have to plug it into one of the originals. I'm going to choose the second one. 2N plus 3 instead of P. Let's put that $1.50. I'm just going to put 1.5 equals 8. So now we have 2N plus, see, 4.5 equals 8. Let's subtract 450 from both sides, leaving me with 2N equals 3.5. Now simply divide both sides by 2, and I'm left with N equals 1.75. So now I know the notebook costs $1.75. Now let's go back to what it was actually asking me. It says how much would 2 notebooks cost and how much would 2 pens cost? So, well, what about a notebook? If it's $1.75 each, if you wanted to buy 2, it would end up costing $3.50 for the notebooks. Sorry, let's specify for 2 notebooks. So if you wanted to, there's 2 ways you could have done it. You could have added $1.75 twice or simply multiply it by 2. Now, what about the pens? Well, if it's $1.50 each, if I bought 2 of them, it would cost $3. So I'm going to say $3 for 2 pens. And that would be it. So you've answered your question. Okay, so moving on. Okay, last but not least, it says the Badger Rent-A-Car rents cars at a daily rate of $23.95 plus 20 cents per mile. Cactus Rent-A-Car rents cars at a daily rate of $22.95 plus 22 cents per mile. For what mileage is the cost the same? So there's 2 things we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the mileage and how that affects the cost. So in that case, for the number of miles, and in this case, T for the total cost. Okay, so for that, let's see. We are looking at 2 companies. I'm going to look at Badger and I'm going to look at Cactus. So for the case of the Badger, it's going to be T equals, because the total cost is going to be comprised of the $23.95 plus the 20 cents per mile. keep things a little bit easier, I am going to drop off that extra 0 and put my m because it's per mile. Now, what about the cactus? Well, the total is going to be comprised of the $22.95 plus the 22 cents per mile. So notice here there's no zeros to drop off. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and use substitution. I'm going to take this value and substitute it in for t. So now we have $23.95 plus the 20 cents m equals 22.95 plus the 22 hundredths m. I do have variables on both sides, so in this case, I do prefer to move it to the left, so let's go ahead and do that. Leaving me with 23.95 minus 2 cents left. The reason why I was able to do this so quickly is basically what is 20 cents minus 22 cents. You're going to be left with a negative 2 cents equals 22.95. In that case, since my variable's on the left, I've got to move my constant over to the right. So let's go ahead and subtract it from both sides, which would leave me with 2 cents m equals a negative. These would be 0, 0, leaving me with just $1 left. Now divide both sides by negative 2 cents. And I'm going to be left with m equals. Now here I'm actually going to show you, because a lot of students mess up with the division aspect of it, especially when there's decimals. So here we're going to do 1 divided by 2 hundredths. So in this case, we're going to have to move our decimal 2 places to the right to make it a whole number. Here, the decimal's after the 1, and we're going to also move it 2 decimal places. So here, in a sense, you're doing 2 and 2 100. 2 cannot go into 1, but it can go into 10 5 times. How many times does 2 go into 0? It goes in 0 times. So here it would be 50 miles. It says, for what mileage is the cost the same? So at this point, I don't have to go any further. I have my answer. I would say the cost would be the same at 50 miles. So please understand, sometimes they ask you for when is it going to cost the same, but sometimes they also ask, and what will that cost be? This one did not, so I'm done. I'm going to leave it at that. So that's actually going to conclude our lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, until next time, bye.